there are roles that we occupy every day. Parents, students, teachers, counselors. But I think that there's a role that's really important that we each occupy every day that we don't pay that much attention to, and that is the role of a third party, a bystander, a witness. So for example, you're walking down the hallway and you see a kid being bullied. Do you step in? Or you're walking along the street and you see somebody getting shoved up against a fence. Do you say something? Or you're a student in a class and you see another student who's struggling, and you have information that could actually help that student out. Should you offer that information? I'm really interested in bystander and third-party involvement because in a way, I'm the beneficiary of bystander involvement. My dad grew up in rural Taiwan. He was one of 10 children. And he was the first person in his family to go to college. And then one of his friends said, there's a scholarship that I know of in Canada that you can apply for. And so my dad applied for that scholarship. And the result of that, he got in, and that accelerated what was possible for my family. That scholarship gave my family global mobility, social and financial opportunity. It speeded up what was possible for my generation. And as a result, even though my father is the beneficiary of that scholarship, I'm actually the real recipient. Now, I'm a college counselor here, and as one of my students said, well, that means that you went to college to help students go to college? Yes, that's exactly what I do. And now that I'm an insider in terms of admissions, I now see how difficult it is for an international student to apply to the United States. It takes an enormous amount of courage to apply to a country far away that's not your home, in a language that's not your own, to study millions of miles away from home. And I know it's such a miracle if a student who is in that position also needs financial aid. There are more than 4,000 schools in the United States, and less than 1% of them offer full financial aid and a scholarship to an international student seeking a seat. Well, last year, there was a school, University of Texas at Tyler, that offered 104 full scholarships, that's tuition, room and board, to students. Some of them were US citizens, and some of them were international students. And this was, for many students, a real miracle. These students had aspired their entire lives to be able to study in the United States, and they were overjoyed to get this scholarship. And many of them told their communities, their families, their parents, their siblings, their villages. And then, after the admissions process was over, 61 of these students received a letter that changed the destinies of their lives. This letter said, "Dear prospective student, thank you for applying to the University of Texas at Tyler. As a candidate for the Presidential Scholars Program, we want to inform you that due to the extraordinary demand for this year's Fellows Program, our scholarship requests exceeded the amount budgeted for this year. As a result, funds for the Presidential Fellows Program are no longer available. We will not be able to offer you the Presidential Fellows Scholarship." So as you can imagine, for many of these students, this was incredibly devastating news. And for Roman in Chitwan, he felt great shame. He thought, it must be my fault, because how could a US university revoke a scholarship if it wasn't something that I did? Even though it wasn't his fault, it was a budgetary error on the part of the university. Rupesh from eastern Nepal, because these students were scattered all throughout the whole country. He was a student who had gotten in the top 1% of test takers for the Institute of Engineering, which is the most prestigious institute for engineering in Nepal. He had gotten a full scholarship to study there, and he just said no to that scholarship so that he could take a full scholarship at UT Tyler. So he went from being a double scholarship student to being a kid who was not going to college at all. We were all kind of watching the situation going on, those of us in the admissions and college counseling field. And by all accounts, this was the worst mistake committed by a US institution in the history of admissions. And for students, this was a real higher ed access emergency. And the reason why is because most of these students were first-generation students. They were coming from households of less than $10,000 a year. And it was a real miracle for them to even have this scholarship. It was unlikely that they would see another scholarship come their way. We all were watching this, and I was kind of thinking to myself, well, somebody should do something about this. This was kind of the conversation in our industry. And one of the things that I kept really thinking to myself was, unless there was third-party involvement or bystander action, there would be no way, actually, in which these students could actually make it to university. And that's because none of these students had college counselors who knew the US process, who understood the financial aid system. And so I thought to myself, well, why not me? Why can't I step forward? You know, I'm somebody, and it might as well just be me. And so I did one small thing, and that is I sent a note into the Facebook universe, and I just asked if people could step forward to help these students. So what ended up happening was 7 women from 5 different countries stepped forward to form a little team that would then volunteer to help these students be replaced. And then 20 more college counselors decided to volunteer their services pro bono to students and pair up with each of these students so that we could offer our expertise and our financial aid knowledge. And what we did was we created almost like a pro bono remote system where we used Skype and WhatsApp to be able to counsel these students. And from the students' point of view, it was a real almost admissions Hunger Games. I want you to imagine an island where if there's a university seat that materializes, it's a lifeboat that's coming along. And students now, all 50 of these kids, now want that particular seat, and we don't actually know if one more seat will come along. From our side, I would often leave work very late at night, and I would wonder to myself, what will happen to these students? What will happen to their futures? What will happen to their families? So there are a couple of things that I have learned from this situation now, and I'd like to share them with you. The first thing that I've learned is that if you're a bystander, even one small thing that you do makes a difference. Every day we would get up and we would chip away, almost like with toothpicks, to a massive glacier. And we would send hundreds of letters, we would leverage our networks, we would ask schools outside the United States if they could step forward to help in some way. We would teach the kids how to tweet out on social media so that this could get into the press and their voices could be more visible. The second thing that I learned was not to listen to naysayers. I was asked questions like, why is this your business? You have a job. These kids aren't your own. Why are you flying to Nepal? And there was a part of me that felt almost as if I was being asked, who are you to have the audacity to think that you could change the trajectory here of these students' lives? The third thing that I realized was something that actually my 10th grade teacher said to me. He said, when faced with somebody else's dilemma, someone else's problem, it doesn't matter what happens to you if you get involved. It matters more what happens to them if you don't. I am happy to say that 10 months after the incident, we saw progress each day, incrementally, slowly, but we saw progress. For example, at Robert Morris University, the dean there woke up one morning and saw the news in the press, and she said to herself, you know, I think we can do something about this. And so she did. She asked her president if they could add another scholarship to their 15 scholarships, and so Robert Morris University decided that they would offer a 16th scholarship that year. And then 24 Nepalis applied for that scholarship. As I said, it was admissions Hunger Games. One student got it. That student was Rupesh. And then it ended up being that he had a gap of $6,000. And he couldn't afford this gap because his family earns $5,000 a year. So the dean went to her board and she said, what can we do about this? And there was a gentleman sitting in the room who said, you know, I'm a first-generation college student. I'll sponsor that student. So a man who did not meet this student, who had never traveled to Nepal, decided to step forward to capacitate this student and resuscitate his future. A counselor called the College of Idaho, her alma mater, and she said, hey, is there any chance that we could help this situation? Is there any chance that we can help this crisis? And of course, this isn't these universities' crisis to solve. They didn't create the situation. But the dean there found a way to create 3 seats, and now 3 Nepali students are there. When faced with someone else's dilemma, someone else's problem, I really feel there is power in being a third party, in being a bystander. From the cultural context that I come from, the question is often, should I get involved? But I think another question that's important is, should I walk away? 10 months after this incident, I'm happy to say that 55 students now have homes. They are now in new universities thanks to bystanders who stepped forward, both on the college counseling side and the press side and the admissions space. I had a chance to meet some of these students in Nepal last year, and we asked the kids, you know, what are your chances of being offered another miracle seat? You know, you had 1 miracle seat and you lost that. And what are your chances of getting another? And one student said, my chances were 1 in 1,000. Another kid said, my chances were 1 in 1,000,000. And one student stood up and he said, my chances were nothing. The happiest day of my life was when I got the UT Tyler Scholarship. The happiest day of my father's life was when I got the UT Tyler Scholarship. The happiest day of my mother's life was when I got the UT Tyler Scholarship. The happiest day of my father's life was when I lost it. Because my father was an alcoholic and he didn't want me and my mother to be happy. He goes, you see my shoes? They're $3 because that's all I could afford and that's all the shopkeeper knew I could afford. So I know I am sitting on a miracle seat and I'm going to protect it with my life. I think everyone has the power to be an important bystander, to step forward when somebody is being bullied, to say something when somebody is being pushed, to offer information to change the destiny of somebody's life like my father and change the trajectory of generations to come. My message to you today is, be a game changer. Don't be a bystander. Be a destiny bender. Thank you.